The Phantom. Seattle suburbs, autumn, late evening. The air was damp, like a crumpled bedsheet after sleep. Laura Slater approached the mansion with a slight shiver, either from the cold or a sense of foreboding. The house looked unnaturally tidy, not a single stain, not a speck of dust. Even the soil under the steps appeared combed. On the plaque by the gate, R. Harlow, private nail design, studio number 17. She had managed to get an appointment by personal recommendation, almost by chance. But ever since she accepted the invitation, a feeling had settled in her mind, as if someone had been waiting for her. Inside, it didn't smell like nail polish, more like disinfectant and something sweet, cloying. The interior was black and white, as if color had been intentionally drained from the room. Harlow appeared soundlessly, tall, composed, dressed in black. He looked tired, his eyes like they were behind glass. "Good evening," he said. "I hope I'm not too early?" "A bit earlier than necessary," he mumbled. "But maybe that's for the best." He gestured to a chair, and she sat down. His hands gently took her wrists, precise, but not soft. He stayed silent longer than expected, just examining her fingers. "What?" she asked. "Doesn't matter," he said sharply, then added, "You have a rare structure, very pure, no protective layers. That's dangerous." Dangerous. An artist could get carried away. "This won't take long," he said, "but the result will be lasting." Laura smiled faintly. "Sounds threatening." "Not threatening, inevitable." He began applying the base, said nothing. His hand was steady, but his fingers were cold. Laura noticed he kept glancing at the mirror on the wall, not at her, at his own reflection. "Excuse me," he murmured after a minute. "Do you hear him?" "Hear who?" He set his tools aside, pulled a small shiny scalpel from his pocket. "He's already close. He chose you." "What? Who?" "I'm sorry. Forgive me if you can," he whispered. He grabbed the scalpel with both hands and drove it into his own throat, swiftly, desperately, screaming, not from pain, but rage. Blood gushed to the floor as he collapsed, gurgling. His eyes stayed open, filled with horror, not madness, but it was already too late. Laura felt her palms stick to the chair, then a jolt in her stomach, like a panic attack. Warmth turned to a freezing chill, like someone pressing against her back. "What's happening?" she screamed, trying to stand. Her legs wouldn't respond. The cold crept upward, under her ribs, into her throat, into the back of her skull. Her head snapped back, pupils dilated. For a moment, a dark flash, like her consciousness blinked. And that was it. Her hands relaxed, breathing evened out. Her posture, upright, facial expression, calm, too calm. Harlow lay on the floor, choking on his own blood, his gaze frozen in her direction, full of terror and pleading. Laura sat still, didn't move for several seconds, then calmly stood up, walked into the hallway, approached the wall-mounted phone, dialed 911. Her voice was steady, almost cheerful. "Hello, I need to report something. There's a man. He took his own life." "Ma'am, are you all right?" "Yes. Everything is calm. There's just a lot of blood." She hung up, returned to the room, stopped at the mirror. For a moment, something flickered in the reflection, like a film over an eye. She raised her hand, ran a finger across the glass, and tilted her head slightly, with a faint foreign smile. "Now I feel real. When the detectives arrive, they will find the body, Raymond Harlow, dead, and Laura, calm, sitting in the chair, with perfectly painted nails." "It's too tidy to be suicide," Ross muttered, standing at the threshold. He said it without emotion, almost bored, as if it were the 100th time. Evan Ross was a detective pushing 50, tall, slightly hunched, with an unshaven chin and a washed-out coat that had long since lost its color. His face was featureless, the kind you forget, but his eyes held a deep, old attentiveness. He was often silent, observed, remembered, spoke only when he already knew. He adjusted his collar as if against the wind and unconsciously touched the ring on his finger. It hadn't meant anything in years, but he never took it off. Following him into the house was Jamie Crawford, shorter, wearing a leather jacket with short dark hair. Her walk was purposeful, direct, but her eyes held a constant tension, like someone who doesn't know how to switch off. She was the kind who noticed the little things, the smell of the air, how witnesses breathed, how long someone held eye contact. She looked just over 30, but her movements and reactions hinted she'd seen more than most people her age. Ross had once said she was a profiler without a badge. Jamie just smirked. They entered the main room. Harlow's body lay by the chair, just as described in the report. His throat was slit. Blood had thickly stuck to the hardwood floor, as if the house tried to hold on to it. The smell wasn't sharp, but sickly sweet. The kind that appears when a body is still warm. "This doesn't look like an impulsive act," Ross said. "More like preparation." "Or a performance piece," Jamie replied. Laura sat in the chair, the same Laura named in the emergency call. She looked calm, pale, but not trembling. Her nails were perfect, deep red, almost black, like dried blood. "Miss Slater," Jamie said gently. Laura turned, smiled, politely, emptily, as if performing a habitual gesture. "Hello. I'm glad you arrived." "Can you tell us what happened?" Ross asked. He barely spoke, just worked in silence. Then suddenly he stopped, looked at me and said, "He liked you." And then he pulled out the knife. "Did he explain who he was?" Jamie asked. Laura looked up, and Ross, suddenly without reason, felt a chill behind his sternum, as if a window had opened in the room. The feeling vanished the moment she looked away. "No," she replied. "I thought maybe he was talking about himself, or a client. It sounded strange." A long pause followed. The soft patter of rain could be heard. "Do you need a doctor?" Jamie asked. "No." Laura shook her head slightly. "I'm fine. Really." But Jamie kept watching her. She felt something strange, dry, and tense. Something was off. Not a threat, not a lie, an absence. As if she was speaking, but not from herself. "Are you cold?" Ross asked. Laura looked at him with a faint smile. "On the contrary, I've never felt this warm." Later in the car. "What do you think?" Ross asked, staring forward as the engine started. Jamie didn't answer right away. She kept looking toward the mansion, as if expecting something to move behind the windows. "Everything's too neat," she said, "and so is she. Not a single slip, no shaking, not even questions, like she was prepared in advance. You think she's involved?" "I don't know," she shrugged slightly. "Not in the usual sense, but something's off about her. Not what she says, how she says it. Cold. Too even, too confident, like she doesn't feel anything at all. That's what's scary." Ross nodded, but said nothing. He had also noticed how Laura's gaze lingered on the mirror just a second too long, and how, from that look, he wanted to turn away. The morning was gloomy, typically northern. Gray sky, sticky air, coffee from a paper cup, hot enough to burn, but not enough to wake him up. Evan Ross sat in the duty room, staring out the window but fully consumed by his thoughts, One scene kept replaying in his mind, Laura's look. That exact moment when she raised her eyes after Jamie's question. He couldn't quite explain what had set him off. It just seemed like she hesitated before answering, by a fraction of a second, as if she were selecting the right reaction, not actually feeling it. Jamie walked in, holding a tablet and a thick stack of printouts. "We've got the first results. On Harlow? Yeah, everything checks out. The weapon was his, prints are his. The front door wasn't forced, no cameras, all signs point to suicide." "And what about her?" Evan asked evenly, without lifting his gaze. "Clean. Works at an ad agency. No psych history, no red flags. Came in for questioning this morning on her own. Went over everything again. Same story, word for word." He finally turned to her. "Word for word?" "Yeah, I checked. Exactly the same. No pauses, no uhs or I think. Like it was memorized." A brief silence followed. "Maybe she's just very composed," Ross offered. "Or very well trained," Jamie said quietly. Later, in the interrogation room, Laura sat calmly, hands on the table, fingers interlaced, her gaze detached. "We'd like you to tell us everything again. Take your time." "Of course," she nodded. Her voice was even, confident, and she told the story, precisely, in order. The same words, the same pauses, not a single mistake. Jamie nodded but didn't take notes. She just watched. Then suddenly asked, "What did you feel at the moment when he—" Laura paused, lightly, almost imperceptibly, as if switching to a new part of a script. "Shock. Only shock? And fear. Pain? No. Why not? He didn't hurt me. But he died in front of you. That should have caused, at least disgust." Laura looked at her. "I've dealt with this before. First my grandmother died, then my grandfather, then my cat. I got used to it." "To death?" Ross asked, speaking for the first time. "To observing." After the interrogation, Jamie paused in the hallway. She acted like she wasn't afraid, at all. "That's not a crime," Ross said quietly. "No. But it's not normal." He said nothing. But later that night, already in bed, Ross would wake up suddenly. No dreams, no sound, just abruptly, with the sensation that someone was watching, even though the room would be empty. He'd get up, walk to the kitchen for a glass of water, and see them. Lipstick marks on the rim of the glass. He lives alone, and he'd only seen that shade of lipstick once, this morning, on her lips. The morning began with the usual autopilot. Shower, coffee, news site left half read. Evan Ross didn't remember the drive to the station. His hands had guided the wheel as if his body, not his mind, had followed invisible rails. But memory didn't fade. It sharpened. On her. On Laura. Her lips. Her voice. The way she looked at him. She wasn't flirting. She wasn't playing along. She was watching. As if choosing. He couldn't take it. 2 hours into his shift, he was already standing at her apartment door. The apartment was surprisingly bright. Simple, cozy, no mirrors, not a single one. She opened the door in a robe, her hair slightly damp, not a trace of surprise on her face. "You came," she said simply. "This morning I found—" He hesitated. "On the glass. Lipstick. Yours. I live alone." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Are you sure it was mine?" He fell silent. There was something in her voice, a game with no humor, that made him feel foolish. "Come in. I was just making waffles, homemade. You can interrogate me over breakfast." The kitchen smelled like butter and something sweet. Laura moved slowly, but precisely, her gaze straight through him. His shoulders were tense, but he couldn't look away. "Does it scare you?" she asked, placing a waffle on his plate. "What?" "That you can't figure me out, can't read me." He nodded slowly. "It's frustrating." "Then not everything in you is dead," she said softly. "You just haven't been challenged in a long time." She handed him a cup of coffee. Her fingers touched his, long, cold and sure. They met 3 more times, officially, just conversations. But each time he left more confused than before, and each day the thought of her became more inevitable. On the 4th night, she came to him. He heard the knock and already knew who was behind the door. He opened it, and she was already standing in the hallway. "May I?" she asked. "There's no point in asking anymore," he replied. The bed was warm, but the sensations were not. It all happened like in a slow-motion dream, movements, touches, her breath. He was with her. And yet, it felt like he was watching from inside. His body moved, his hands caressed, his lips whispered, but there were no choices. And then, something broke loose, not from him, from her. He felt the air in the room contract, like someone had taken too deep a breath. Something cold, foreign, and heavy slid across his chest, like an icy snake. He shuddered, stopped breathing for a second. Laura convulsed, her whole body jolting as if electrocuted, and then she screamed, a raw, desperate scream. "No," she cried. "Don't, please." She tried to get up, pull off the sheet, crawl away, but his hands were already around her wrists. "Ross," she sobbed. "It's not you. You have to stop." He heard her. He even wanted to. Something inside screamed back. His hands trembled. His fingers almost let go. For a moment he returned and saw her face, filled with fear and hope. But in the next second, his hands tightened again. He didn't command them. He wasn't in control. Laura struggled, tried to break free to get up, but he caught her and pinned her to the mattress. "Please," she choked out. "I don't want to die." His fingers closed around her throat. She gasped, convulsed, and went limp. And still, he held on. The body remained on the sheets. He sat at the edge of the bed, breathing heavily, naked, sweaty, not himself. He looked at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time, then looked at her body. It was silent, entirely real, entirely dead. "Thank you," he said aloud. His voice was emotionless. "Now you're free." Laura hadn't made contact for 3 days. Jamie reread her number in the case file, looked at the empty line in her call log, then closed her phone. She wasn't sure what worried her more, Laura's silence or the way Ross was ignoring it. "Maybe she left," he said. "Without her things?" Jamie replied. "Without a word?" He shrugged. "She had no reason to stay. We closed the case. Suicide. All clean." He spoke calmly. Too calmly, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. Lately he had been avoiding her gaze altogether, so she started watching him. He came into the station earlier than usual, shaved every day, ironed his shirts, started drinking a different kind of coffee, the kind he used to call soapy water, and he was unnervingly calm. No irritation, no fatigue, none of his usual cynical grumbling, The Ross she knew was tired, but alive. This one, composed and empty. One day he fell asleep at his desk. She walked over to wake him and saw that he had been sketching in his notebook. At first it looked like random lines, but when she looked closer, she recognized hands. Female hands, with long fingers, nails precisely drawn. He woke up and quickly flipped the page. "Did you need something?" "No," she lied. "Just checking if you were still breathing." He smirked, and the smile wasn't his. Polite, polished, like a borrowed mask. That same night she returned to the case, opened the closed file, reviewed the reports, photos, call logs, and found something she hadn't noticed before. A draft report, before her edits. Ross had written it the night of the first visit. In the notes it said, "Witness, Laura S. cold, but not empty. Signs of anxiety. Pulse elevated, lips dry, voice trembling, gaze unfocused." And then, the finalized report. Witness is calm, composed, no behavioral abnormalities observed. Same author. Two different impressions. She reread them both. The first, alive. The second, like it was read off a script. The next day she called Ross for a talk. Informal. They stepped out into the back lot of the station, where no one could hear. "Are you sure Laura's all right?" she asked. "Why wouldn't she be?" he replied, looking straight at her, barely blinking. "Did you see her after the interrogation?" "No. Did you?" She didn't answer, but just in case, she lied. "I got a letter. Request for relocation to another state, dated before she could have known she'd need it." He paused, then nodded. "Then she left." "Do you miss her?" He smiled. "Why should I?" And in that smile, there was something subtly off. Not the weary smirk of a tired man, a rehearsed reaction. When he left, she remained alone, and suddenly remembered, during the interrogation when Laura spoke about death, Ross had looked away. He'd clenched his fist. A small thing, but she noticed. Because real emotions can't be faked, they break through in micro-movements. Now, it was the opposite. He had everything right. The look, the voice, the posture, but nothing real. That same evening she filled out a missing person report, without clearance, without Ross. Name, Laura Slater. Last seen, 3 days ago. Contact, not responding. Phone inactive. Notes may have been in danger. Suspicion, unexplained disappearance. She signed the document, slowly. They stood at the foot of the stairs. Harlow's house hadn't changed. The same curtains, the same wallpaper, as if faded by time, not sunlight. But the air inside was different, too dense, as if the walls were exhaling not air, but something old, stale, alien. "I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything," Ross said. His voice was steady, calm, like a man without doubt, and without emotion. "That's all?" Jamie asked. "This needs to be closed, for the record, for myself." They walked into the living room. That same corner. The chair where Laura had sat. The stain on the floor had long been cleaned, but the wood was still slightly darker, as if the blood had left a mark in the house itself. Jamie slowly looked around. Ross stood nearby, silent. "You've been back here often since that night?" she asked. Once. Maybe twice. I wasn't sleeping well. I needed to come back." He said it calmly, but his hands were buried deep in his pockets. Upstairs was stifling. The rooms were closed, except one, the bedroom. Jamie entered first. Ross lingered in the doorway. On the bed, rumpled sheets. On the nightstand, a glass with a lipstick print. Color, deep, almost black. Her stomach twisted. Ross. He didn't respond. She turned, and for the first time in her life, she was afraid of him. Truly afraid. He stood still, his face, a mask. But his eyes were looking from somewhere deep inside, as if someone else was behind them. And behind him, in the mirror, for just a moment, something moved. Dark, formed from alien silhouettes, no faces, just outlines, and a hand resting on his shoulder. She stepped back. Ross, that's not you. It is, he said, but the voice was different, dry, without pauses, almost like Laura's. He stepped closer. I thought you'd understand. You always saw deeper. Back off. I want you to stay, completely, here with me. This isn't you. Stop it. He leaned closer, spoke almost in a whisper, but as if inside her. I can feel you trembling. You've always wanted this. You just never admitted it. He touched her hand. There was no warmth. The skin was cool and dry, like paper. She pulled away, drew her gun. Back off. He stopped, looked at her silently, then suddenly smiled. She tried to pull the trigger, but her finger trembled. Too late. A moment later, he lunged. He crashed into her like a wave. No scream, no emotion, just mechanical precision. The gun flew from her hand. He struck her in the ribs with his elbow, sharp and fast. Air burst from her lungs. She staggered. He struck again, in the face, from the side. Bone cracked under her eye, everything blurred, ringing in her ears. She tried to crawl away, but he grabbed her by the hair and slammed her down, face to the floor. Her forehead hit the parquet. Stars burst in her vision, metal in her mouth. Something warm ran down her cheek. Blood or tears, she didn't know. He pulled her up again and slammed her into the wall. Her head fell back. She couldn't breathe. Her neck burned under his hand. I need you, he whispered in a foreign voice. You're perfect, better than her, deeper. She rasped. Her nails dug into his hand. He didn't flinch, only tightened his grip. Free hand. Where was the gun? She couldn't think. Her body shook, a spasm in her gut. Left knee, forward, she hit his thigh. He staggered. There, the gun, under the chair. She dove, nearly falling. He tried to pull her back. She struck him across the face with the flat of the gun. He jolted, not from pain, but surprise, as if he hadn't expected her to still fight back. She raised the gun and fired, straight into his chest. His body jerked back. He fell. This time, he didn't get up. The house fell silent. She rose with difficulty, leaning against the wall. Blood dripped from her lips, gun in hand. She was shaking. She walked to the body, looked closely. It was him, and not him. The air on the floor still carried the feeling of something else, and she felt, inside, cold, down her back, through her stomach, up her neck. Something was entering. The ambulance never came. She hadn't called. The phone lay somewhere in the corner, or downstairs on the stairs. It didn't matter anymore. She sat on the floor, back against the wall. Next to her, the corpse. Evan Ross, detective, partner, friend. He was heavy, dead, and finally silent. Blood trickled down her cheek. Her vision was blurring, but worse was what was happening inside. First came the cold, slow, persistent, along the spine, through the flesh, not like a chill, like an invasion. Then, a voice. Not words. Intention. She didn't hear it. She felt it, as if someone was thinking inside her. You're strong. You're the right one. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressed her forehead to her knees. No, she whispered. Not me. But the dreams had already begun. Not images, sensations. She's sitting in a chair, looking at the door, in her hands, nail scissors. She knows someone will enter, and she knows it will be beautiful. Her hand twitched. She remembered the scent, that same one, sweet, almost caramel, the smell of fresh blood. You'll be better. You'll forget the pain, only form will remain. She slapped her cheek, hard. Air rushed back in. She was still here. She reached the wall, stood up. Her legs trembled, her body ached, but she walked, down the stairs, to the kitchen, the fridge, poured water, drank. Her hands felt foreign, as if they moved with a slight delay. On the glass, lipstick, lipstick. No, no, no. She stepped to the mirror, looked into her eyes, and didn't recognize herself. Something lingered in her pupils. Not a reflection, a shadow. Only one way out. One. The gun. She grabbed it, positioned her hands like in training, a deep breath. In her head, it was growing quieter, as if something had been startled, or was waiting. Only through me, she said, and pulled the trigger. The darkness didn't come immediately. First, there was a flash, then light, then silence, and then nothing. Internal report, Madison County Police Department, case number 431HL. Status, archived. Type, internal investigation. Subject, Detective Evan Ross. Incident. Following the closure of the Ryan Harlow suicide case, Detective Ross began to exhibit signs of psycho-emotional instability. Amid sudden behavioral changes, he withdrew from communication with colleagues and relocated to the client's address, the Harlow residence. Preliminary findings suggest that Ross murdered witness Laura Slater 2 days before he reported her departure. The body was discovered in the upstairs bedroom, in an early state of mummification. Forensic analysis determined the corpse had been in the room for no less than 72 hours. Despite this, Detective Ross continued reporting for duty, appearing composed and stable. His demeanor was described as stern, detached, but did not raise immediate operational concerns. Detective Jamie Crawford, his partner, filed an internal notice expressing concern over Ross's behavior 2 days prior to her own death. Crawford went to the Harlow residence on her own the evening of the 14th. Her body was discovered 3 hours later in the second-floor bedroom. Cause of death: gunshot wound to the head. Service weapon: single shot. No witnesses. Her body bore multiple injuries consistent with physical confrontation. However, the shot was definitively self-inflicted. The internal investigation found no conclusive evidence of an assault by Ross. However, his behavior within the final 72 hours was classified as uncontrolled and psychopathological. The Harlow residence has been designated a site of heightened social sensitivity. Access is temporarily restricted pending legal review. All property has been frozen. Conclusion: the incident is determined to be the result of severe paranoia triggered by a psychological breakdown in Evan Ross. His name has been removed from the list of active personnel. Case closed.